I'm Kevin Rinke, and I'd like to welcome you to Beyond the Echo. I ran for governor in Michigan. After losing that election, my desire to look at issues that are important to the state or the country grew. There is so much static. There are so many opinions. Our news stations have gotten to the point where we don't know what news is anymore. Where do you go to get real facts? This is about real perspective for you. Beyond the Echo will cut through all the smoke, all the opinions. It's not about Republicans, it's not about Democrats, it's about the issues and what are real. Hey everybody, Kevin Rinke here, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Echo, where we talk about Michigan, we talk about politics, we talk about life. Today, I am proud to say that I've got a candidate for Attorney General in the 2026 election, a gentleman by the name of Kevin Kijewski. And Kevin has a wealth of experience, one heck of an attorney, and has a story to tell that I think would add value for you. So, Kevin, welcome to the show, and thanks for making time for us today.
Thanks for coming. It's great.
Yeah. Kevin, Attorney General, it's such a unique position. Tell us about how you are qualified to be Attorney General of Michigan, if you would, please.
Sure. So when it comes to being the Attorney General for Michigan, you are the lawyer for all the people in the state of Michigan, all 10 million plus. So your client is really the public. And what I have been doing over the past several years is trying to serve the public, but in the role as a private attorney. So for example, just this past week, I picked up a handful of clients from Flint that were arrested for disorderly conduct because they wanted to speak at a Flint City Council meeting. The City Council didn't like what they had to say. So ultimately, what happened? They got arrested and they were thrown into jail for a few days without being arraigned. That's wrong. So in terms of trying to serve the public interest, that's what I want to do with cases like that, or when I wanted to try to keep the schools open during COVID, which we were successful in doing the second time that Governor Whitmer wanted to try to shut them down. It's about serving the public interest.
If you would, please tell the listeners, you're implying that you sued the state of Michigan or the governor on behalf of the people of Michigan. Please, these folks don't know this, so
Sure.
It's important that you explain to them, what prompted you? Who was your client in that particular case?
So I actually, in addition to being an attorney, I was a school superintendent as well for the Archdiocese of Detroit. So I served, frankly, about 30,000 kids, 90 schools. We had 3,000 employees. And I was doing this at the time that COVID happened, also serving as kind of general counsel for the Archdiocese as it related to schools. Lawyers were great at trying to do a handful of things and trying to manage things. That's one thing I did when it came to education. Long story short, COVID happened. We had the schools shut down the first time. And everyone sort of gave the governor a little bit of a pass because we didn't know exactly what was going on. But as time passed by, now I'm talking about fall or November of 2020, the governor attempted to shut down the schools again, but only the high schools, trying to claim that the kids were super spreaders or something like that. So in addition to being superintendent, I was actually the vice chairman of the board for the Michigan Association of Non-Public Schools, or MANS for short. Represents all the Catholic schools, Lutheran schools, all the private schools in the state. And I said to my fellow board members, we can't allow this to stand. So we sued the governor, basically. And what happened? We had a nice court hearing for a temporary restraining order. The judge in the Western District of Michigan, the federal judge, heard arguments, took him under advisement, saying, let me think about this. I'm going to put forward an opinion. And I kid you not, literally hours before that opinion was going to be released, the governor had an impromptu press conference. And she said that the science and the evidence has changed. So therefore, we don't need to have this. To me, it's a win in the sense that our kids are able to go to school. But at the same time, we know why she did that, because she was about to lose.
Yeah, politically, she was going to get her backside handed to her.
Right.
That's kind of funny. Yeah, interesting. Judges in Michigan are supposed to be nonpartisan.
Right.
The Attorney General's office represents all the people of Michigan,
Right.
yet they run on a partisan platform.
Yeah.
Tell me, how are you going to support conservative values, but at the same time fairly represent non-conservatives in
Right.
Michigan?
Right. Well, I think when we take a look at conservatism, one of the hallmarks is trying to make sure that we just equally and impartially enforce the law. Conservatives, we believe that. And then when we take a look at the role of Attorney General, that's how I would actually follow the law.
You mean you don't want to make the law with your
I
decisions?
don't want to make the law. I'm not actually a legislator. I'm not a judge. I'm just an advocate for the people. And the Attorney General's role, I mean, it's all about, of course, doing criminal prosecutions in the name of the people of the state of Michigan, consumer protection, making sure that we represent the interests of the state. But it's not about making policy. That's up to policymakers. So if we got a governor, we have legislators, allow them to do their job. That's not my job.
See, it's so interesting that you say that. I was on social media yesterday, in fact, and I was talking about ICE and FBI and the various police departments, the enforcement units that exist in the country. And those people pledge to support the Constitution
Right.
and to enforce the laws that are on the books.
Right.
And I think that it is so disingenuous that we have politicians on either side that come out and accuse the people that are enforcing the laws that politicians write, the politicians vote on and implement,
That's right.
as being stormtroopers, as being, kidnappers or criminals. And they encourage violence against these people versus introducing legislation to clarify what the law should be or to eliminate the law. But you can't say, we've got a law in the books and we choose not to enforce it.
Right.
It's interesting, and I'm glad to hear that is your approach.
If I may comment on that really quickly. So I find that fascinating because 2 days ago, since we're recording this, 2 days after this happened, the Attorney General decided to join a lawsuit, a federal lawsuit with other attorneys general, Democratic attorneys general, to actually go after ICE and the Trump administration, essentially taking illegal aliens and prioritizing them over regular U.S. citizens. And I took to my Twitter account and I just said how disappointed I am in actually the Attorney General getting involved in such frivolous litigation, but even more so, trying to ensure that all of these people that should be deported and have their due process and all that other good stuff, how they're being favored over U.S. citizens. So when I take a look at our Attorney
Or
General,
U.S. employees enforcing the laws of the U.S. government.
correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we just enforce the law. And from the role of an attorney general, like if I were elected attorney general here in Michigan, I'm not going to be doing the federal law enforcement. I'm going to stay out of the way. And I also said on Twitter as well, and I said it a few different times, if people obstruct ICE or federal law enforcement, I will treat them as criminals and charge them with obstruction.
Really interesting question for you then, because I do not understand the concept of sanctuary cities, which is a direct conflict with federal law enforcement.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you like. Sanctuary city sounds like a very pleasing, very, soft, we're welcoming type name.
Yeah.
When in reality, it is basically saying, F the federal government. We are not going to enforce the laws or assist them
Right.
in enforcing the laws because we're welcoming and soft and pleasing. Give us some feedback on that, please.
Yeah.
How can they do that legally?
Well, it's okay if folks have their own opinion or philosophy, but if they actually have policies, practices, or procedures that get in the way of law enforcement or enforcing the law, then that's a problem. And I would actually view that as obstruction. So, for example, if we have a city here in Michigan that says all illegal aliens or undocumented people or whatever they want to call them are welcome in our city, you can say that all day long. But as soon as they trample on federal law enforcement or they trample on the rights of U.S. citizens, then that's an issue. And that's not going to be happening here.
So, as the Attorney General, you're saying that you would act against a city that, for instance, either refused or impeded
Correct.
federal enforcement of our immigration laws.
110%. Because when it comes to these cities and the individuals that are city council members or folks that work for the cities, they don't get to decide what's going to happen with federal law enforcement. Federal law enforcement needs to be able to do their jobs. And then, not to segue into other things, but you could take a look at some of these policies that they have regarding housing and giving grants and all of these other things that happen. It makes things more expensive for Michiganders and U.S. citizens. It makes things more dangerous as well when it comes to these folks that are undocumented or they're here illegally. What ends up happening? Crime goes up, expenses go up, and that's why we cannot tolerate sanctuary cities. So I know that there are several gubernatorial candidates that say that they want to end sanctuary cities. That's great. But in terms of the
It's not the governor's role.
Right, exactly.
Ultimately, they cannot. That's a problem with politicians versus business people in understanding. Politicians come up with, oh, I'm going to end sanctuary cities.
Yeah.
No, you aren't, because you don't have the authority to do it ultimately.
And that's right. And it's good that they have that view.
There's a legal
Right.
access.
Amen.
And another issue that I want to clarify for our listeners, because the law is very complex.
Yeah.
And for the average person, it doesn't always make sense.
Right.
So let's go back to sanctuary cities.
Sure.
As Attorney General, would you proactively, before the law was broken, go to a sanctuary city and say, that is saying, we're not going to support the federal enforcement, and file a lawsuit against that city? Or would you wait for the law to be broken by the city and its representatives?
That's
a nuance.
Right. And that's a great question. On day one, I would actually have something, they're not executive orders, but you could kind of look at them as such. They're called Attorney General opinions. And I would issue an Attorney General opinion talking about the constitutionality and the legality of sanctuary cities. And
Hasn't there been case law set, though, that says sanctuary cities constitutionally can exist in Michigan? Mm-hmm. So you're going to overturn that case law?
Not necessarily, but I'm going to provide the contours or I would say the nuance that we have to have regarding how to look at this. The executive order, from a governor can promulgate a whole bunch of things, but the Attorney General having an Attorney General opinion, I can say, look, you can say your philosophy all day long, but you cannot impede, obstruct, or otherwise get in the way of actually the rights of Michiganders. And if you do that, that's unconstitutional. And if it is unconstitutional, I'm giving you a warning shot right now. The state of Michigan will treat that as a crime.
Yeah, and by the way, a business leader who understands how the process works versus a politician would ask for an opinion from his attorney general to be published in advance before action being taken.
It's always good to consult a lawyer first.
They dwell on small details, that's for sure. That's for sure. So there's an interesting case, and our utilities in Michigan have some very unique protections that have been provided via Lansing that have caused the citizens of Michigan to suffer, in my view. Poorer infrastructure and higher rates. And there's a case right now that was filed where Consumers Power, I believe it is suing a county and a city in Michigan, St. Clair, because they restricted the actions that consumers could take regarding wind and solar farms. Talk to us about that, because there's a lot of folks in Michigan, and me being one of them, that thinks that the authority to allow a wind farm, the authority to allow a solar farm should be determined locally, not at the state level.
Right.
And Gretchen Whitmer and Dana Nessel took away that local control
Right.
with their actions. Please, how is that legal? How is that right? And more importantly, what's Kevin Kijewski do if he's Attorney General?
Well, first of all, I wholeheartedly agree with you because local control is something that we believe here in Michigan. We have the home rule doctrine. Essentially, cities, municipalities, through zoning, through ordinances, can control what happens in their cities. The state government should really stay outside of this, area as much as possible, unless there is a quote unquote compelling state interest. I understand that when it comes to some folks in Lansing of a political persuasion that is not my own, that they want to have all these forms of alternate energy, green energy, whatever, fine. But that doesn't give you the right to usurp or to overtake what a local group of citizens want to have in their community. I mean,
Has eminent domain by the state been applied locally in any county in Michigan for wind or solar power that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of that, but if that does happen, I view that as an abuse of the Fifth Amendment, the Takings Clause. Because I won't get into a lot of histrionics or all the nerd stuff,
Right.
but you could take a look even at the 1980s, the Poletown case, where you actually had,
Not only Poletown, but
yeah,
I-696.
that too,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, significant
Yeah.
abuse by Lansing.
And that's the interesting parallel that we can draw because if you take a look at 696 or the Poletown case, without getting into the particulars, saying the state believes that there is an economic interest here and giving it to private citizens to do, giving it to a private company to do something with it. I mean, that's not a good thing. It should be for roads or other things that need to happen, eminent domain. But to say, in the name of the state of Michigan, because of an economic interest, I'm going to take your land, your property, and I'm going to give it to someone else, that's not right. And there's a logical parallel between that type of stuff and what's happening with the wind and solar stuff. Wind and solar, if people want in their local community to permit that through zoning, great. But it shouldn't be compulsory and it shouldn't be done where you take away the ability of folks to say what's going to happen in their own community. That's wrong.
Yeah. Quick question and clarification.
Yeah.
The state owns a bunch of land in Michigan. And I think the state owns land in all 83 counties,
I think that's right.
in fact. So the local community on their property says, we don't want wind and solar. The state says, we're going to work with our utility provider, and on our property, we're going to allow wind and solar. Is that legal?
Well, if it's state property, they frankly have to make sure that they're not going to have an obstruction to anything that, for example, the local citizens want. And it's a case-by-case basis. As long as the state is not abusing or obstructing the use of the community in that particular area, then it might be permissible. But it's a state-by-state, it's a county-by-county or city-by-city issue for the most part.
Interesting. And again, the complexity of the law, I'll tell you what, it kind of goes over my head at times. And I think most people purely want common sense.
Yeah.
They want to be heard. They want to feel that the legal system is equal for everyone, not bought and paid for.
Right.
Let's talk about our current Attorney General in a case that has grinded me, that I don't know that people in Michigan really can get their hands around.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to make some broad statements. And please, if my statements are incorrect, correct me. But it's my understanding that Dana Nessel spent roughly $59 million trying to prosecute ex-Governor Rick Snyder on a misdemeanor for the Flint water crisis.
Right.
Now, hold that thought for a moment, because it's also my understanding that there has never been an individual in Flint that tested over the federal clean water requirements that exist. It's my understanding that the laws in Michigan are over 100 times tougher than the federal law, and that every day in America, there are 19 states that are complying with the federal level without any negative effects. Help me understand how an attorney general can spend $59 million in taxpayer money on a misdemeanor and trying to enforce a law that exceeds the federal law by 100%.
Yeah, so you take a look at what happened in Flint with the water crisis. Absolutely tragic. The real tragic thing is there are tons of people that should be held criminally responsible for what happened, but they're never going to be held accountable.
Without naming
Yeah,
names, explain the criminal act
yeah,
within the Flint water crisis for our listeners.
absolutely. So what happened was when the prior attorney general, prior to Dana Nessel, Bill Schuette, he actually charged multiple people in Flint for actually essentially violating the public trust and doing some things that were not quite so kosher or legal and holding.
Do you mind explaining what those things are? Because in
Yeah, so
generality,
so basically, not making sure that we had the proper rules and regulations followed, basically turning a blind eye. So we actually had this problem with Legionnaire's disease, and we had all these other issues that occurred because people didn't do their due diligence as required, being a worker over there or an employee in
for
Flint.
either the city, the county,
Right,
but not the state.
right.
Got it.
So all of those individuals, we had a mixture of them that were going to be charged, and they were charged. And then, of course, Dana Nessel's elected. And what ends up happening? Dana Nessel, for whatever inexplicable reason, but we'll hopefully get an answer, and I'll talk about how that can happen in a little bit, but she dismissed all of those cases. And then the statute of limitations ran out. These people who have been appropriately charged previously, they will never, ever legally be able to be held accountable. We're talking about the court of public opinion or, God above. That's a different issue. But legally in a courtroom, they can never be held accountable. And then to your point about Governor Snyder, they needed someone to go after. So then they spend tons and tons of money in order to try to prosecute him. And I believe there was another associate of his that they went after too.
Yeah, in fact, his case is still being resolved. If I'm not, I forgot the gentleman's name.
I forgot too, but he attempted, I think, to sue for his legal fees and everything.
Yes.
And then he got a negative decision recently, like in the past few weeks, from what I understand.
From our fairly balanced Supreme Court, I believe that decision came down.
Right.
Digressing.
Sure.
Before we get back to that
Yeah.
issue, because I think it's really important that people understand how abusive an attorney general can be.
Yeah.
And how important following the laws are.
Mm-hmm.
And going even a step further, how important it is to have the right people in the right roles
Right.
in government if you really want government to work for you. How many of our current Supreme Court justices were judges prior to be elected to the Supreme Court?
I don't know for sure, but I think if there were any, we're maybe taking a look at one or two.
And would that one or two be a Republican, although they're all nonpartisan,
Yeah.
right, or a Democrat?
I believe right now Justice Zara is the only person that was endorsed by the Republican Party that's currently on the court. We are completely outnumbered in terms of folks being nominated from the Democratic Party versus folks nominated by the Republican Party on the quote-unquote nonpartisan ballot. A lot of these folks, they didn't have judicial experience before. It doesn't mean that they can't be a good, justice or judge.
Is it possible for an attorney, And traditionally, what I find interesting is they are usually plaintiff attorneys
Mhm.
that have run for the Supreme Court and been appointed. Totally different outlook
Yeah.
on things and how things should be done than defense attorneys.
Right. And it's interesting
Can,
because
can they go and suddenly sit down at our highest court in the state with no judicial experience and do a good job?
I think it's possible, but it's questionable, right? And I'm not trying to cast shade on anyone, but if I take a look, for example, at one justice, and I won't mention the justice's name, this individual ran for election not that long ago, lost, and then when there was a vacancy, she was appointed. And then what ended up happening after she was appointed, even though she lost in a general election, but then was appointed, she had the power of the incumbency, so to speak,
Right.
and then got elected, and she will be there for the foreseeable future. The problem, I think, is when we take a look at judges, and this happens all over the place, not just the Supreme Court here in Michigan, but also the Court of Appeals, and especially the circuit courts. And I typically work in Macomb, Oakland, Wayne here in southeastern Michigan. A lot of them were appointed and they run for reelection. And most people, whether right or wrong, when they go to the ballot, they take a look to see who's the incumbent and they don't really know a lot
Right.
about them and they just
Check yes.
select them. Right.
Can an attorney general do anything to control the flow of suits that get exposed to the various levels, district, circuit, Supreme Court?
To a certain extent, yes. So, for example, the one thing I could think of right now is we can actually, if we would bring a civil suit against someone, we can actually have our choice of venue or form. We can go to the state courts, we could start there in a circuit court, or a lot of times, because we have federal issues and federal legislation that might be involved, we can actually go to the federal courts. I'm not trying to say I want to bypass or usurp our wonderful Michigan courts, but
But once
sometimes,
precedence is established, it changes the whole view
yeah,
of how our higher courts
right,
respond.
right,
And again, a key nuance that I hear from people in Michigan often is why doesn't the Supreme Court make a firm decision when they get cases? Many times, what they are doing is saying the case in front of them
mm-hmm,
does simply not comply with the law.
mm-hmm,
It doesn't close the door for different lawsuits to be filed on the same subject
yeah,
from a different angle.
right.
Your thoughts on that?
I think that really, when you take a look at any Supreme Court decision or opinion, it really should give essentially a precedential value regarding a rule or a way to analyze a case, a procedure, so that it can be generally applied. I don't like these one off opinions that happen. It happens at the federal level too, but they basically say this is constrained to this one case. I mean, it's interesting, like when folks go to law school and they're law students, you read, opinions from courts of appeal in addition to the U.S. Supreme Court. Why? Because you take a look at the precedential value and the rule of law that could be applied in a whole host of cases. So I think that these cases really should be instructive as opposed to like one offs and then you can't necessarily deduce anything from them.
See, I think that's really interesting because in my lifetime, and I'm not an attorney, but was always fascinated with the Supreme Court. And I believe that we are seeing more decisions that are singular in nature.
Yeah.
And consequentially, we are seeing more attorneys and more judges challenge the Supreme Court than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
What's that going to do for the people who rely on the Supreme Court? And we all rely on the Supreme Court for legal application, legal equality, and direction of our country
Mm-hmm.
in conjunction with the three branches of government. We've got in my view, a potential legal calamity and restructuring that is serendipitously being applied to the citizens of the United States. And I personally don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like it at all. Your thoughts?
So if I take a look at the U.S. Supreme Court, for example, they only take about 70, 80 cases a year among thousands of requests that come in, either from an appeal that came from a state Supreme Court or maybe one of the federal courts of appeal. And what they're supposed to do, any Supreme Court, whether we're taking a look at the U.S. Supreme Court or like a state Supreme Court, is to settle questions about the law. And what ends up happening sometimes, we have these very, interesting cases that come up, and they don't necessarily give that general rule for application. They might just settle that one thing. But what they're supposed to do, like for example, I have a case that will likely be ending up before the Supreme Court relatively soon. I don't know if they'll take it or not, but it's to resolve something called a circuit split. Like, without getting too nerdy and everything else, the federal district that we're in is Michigan, Indiana, taking a look at Kentucky, Ohio. These particular states comprise the Sixth Circuit. And you have right next door the Fifth Circuit. And actually, it's a circuit that kind of goes all the way down to Texas. I know that's weird to think. But there's a difference in opinion how the Sixth Circuit would apply the law in this one case I'm talking about versus the Fifth. And we're applying to the Supreme Court for, it's called a writ of certiorari, basically permission, please take my case, because we want them to resolve that circuit split. That's what Supreme Courts, whether federal or state, really should be doing.
Really clarifying.
Yes.
In saying, stay within these boundaries.
Right.
Instead of creating precedents that allows for more gray area. I'm a black and white guy.
Me too.
I mean, I understand that if I'm on this side of the law, I should be safe. And if I choose to cross that line, I understand that there are consequences, and don't think that I'm above consequences. We've got people today that actually think that they're just simply above the consequences of the law.
Right. I mean, one thing in particular, just to mention, because I was in the 10th Congressional District yesterday, and I was talking with a handful of delegates in the GOP there. I had one very well-intentioned woman come up to me. I think she might be running for the state house at some point, and I forget her name, and I apologize. But with that being said, she came up and she said, look, in terms of that state Senate vacancy around Saginaw, I think maybe it's the 35th, I forget the actual Senate district.
Right. Bay County, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. But you end up taking a look at the governor. She has a duty to call a special election, and she hasn't done it. She hasn't had a special election there whatsoever. She's leaving that seat vacant. That is a big, big problem. And I think that when you take a look at, the governor saying that I'm not going to have a special election, I'm not trying to impute any ill intention to her, because I don't know, but she feels like there are no consequences. And unfortunately, she might be right. Because
no consequences to her. That doesn't mean no consequences to we the people.
Right. There are consequences to all those people there in that particular Senate district because they don't have representation. But because she's doing this intentional act of not calling a special election.
She's so busy being on vacations and business tours around the country.
Yeah, going to Australia, I understand, and doing a trade mission there.
Working well.
Yeah.
It's very interesting how situational.
Yeah.
In a situation where the executive should be compelled to comply with the law, whether they like it or not.
Yeah.
A true executive doesn't ignore the law.
Yeah.
They influence the legislature to change the law,
right,
potentially, or guide them in changing the law, but they shouldn't simply ignore the law.
No.
And a nonpartisan attorney general would be compelled to enforce or force the executive to enforce the law through their actions.
So on that point, if I may, I did tell that group of folks I was speaking with a remedy, maybe not necessarily for this particular instance, but in the future, the legislature, they could actually say and pass legislation signed by a governor, you need to call a special election within X number of days or months, right?
Yeah.
But as well, what I can do on day one, and I told her I would look into this, an attorney general opinion about what the governor or the chief executive of the state needs to do, what a reasonable amount of time would be to actually call an election. And again, it's not, forcing the governor's hand, but it's giving the legal rationale because
It's given
a guideline because these people are being disenfranchised.
Yeah.
It's taxation without representation.
Can I caution you on something? And I
Oh.
really hope you get a day one, but you're going to need about 96 hours on day one, and there's only 24.
Yeah.
So why don't you say in the first 30 days? It'll just help you out a little bit. I get people asking me all the time, if I were elected governor, what am I going to do on day one? And I jokingly say, probably after that brutal of an election, sit back, have a beer, get a massage, and
So I'll say this.
smile.
I'll say
first
this.
30 days.
Yeah, first day is to get the processes started, right?
Right.
But not have like, a Trump level event where you're signing a whole bunch of stuff. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually would have an event where I would, if elected, if I ran, where I would go to the Attorney General prior to being sworn in to clarify that gubernatorial authority on issues that were important to me, that I had represented to the citizenry that I would act on,
Yeah.
and on day one start signing gubernatorial directives and initiatives to compel the legislature to act accordingly.
And I think that's a great idea. And not to get too much into executive power, but I believe that anyone that holds the role of governor in Michigan, they have some awesome responsibilities. But the two that I think that are the most important is really number one, appointments that they make to either judicial branches or courts, or taking a look at other things. But also, second, they can issue executive orders, and this has been done before with Governor Engler, completely reorganizing how offices and departments look like.
Yeah.
And that, for example, back in the 90s, changed how the whole Board of Education looked like, and that made an impact on education at that time.
Well, it's interesting that you bring up education, because since they usurped John Engler's orders on education, and there was a certain lady by the name of Jennifer Granholm that reversed those orders,
Right.
Michigan public education has plummeted, and the state has suffered, the counties have suffered,
Yeah.
the cities have suffered, but most importantly, our children
Yeah.
have suffered. And the consequence to our business community and our ability to be significant, either from a manufacturing perspective or from a job perspective, and an attractant based on what we have to offer
Right.
through our citizens to potential employers, has been dramatically damaged. And it's going to take significant time. Currently, Michigan, with all of our great universities, leads the nation in kids that have to go somewhere else to get a job. That's tragic.
It is.
We have data that shows that like 18% of third graders can read at a third grade level in certain communities. That overall, over 70% of our third graders in public schools across the state can't read at grade level. And why would a business come here? What we are doing right now under the current educational structure that Gretchen Whitmer has supported, that Jennifer Granholm supported, and quite frankly, a disappointment in my mind that Rick Snyder did not effectively address, was creating an environment for our kids to be successful in mandating to receive taxpayer dollars at the local level, because it goes to the government and then comes back.
Right.
that there are certain criteria that have to be met
Hmm.
without excuse, without exception, or government becomes involved.
Right.
As an attorney general, are you going to support a governor that wants to rework education so our kids have a chance at a future instead of being dependent on the state?
100%. And I'm speaking about this maybe with two different hats. One, as an attorney, but also second, as a former school superintendent. I mean, I take a look at what has happened with education. It has gone down the toilet, unfortunately, because of a lot of different things. And what needs to happen? We have to have money follow children. I firmly believe.
I agree with that
Yeah,
100%.
in school choice and doing all that other good stuff, right? But at the same time, there are also other issues where immediately, like, not necessarily it'll happen on day one, we'll start the process, but we're going to be opening up a department for parental and student rights. That will happen. We're going to be the second state to do
Does
that.
does the attorney general do that or does the governor do that?
Well, in terms of actually enforcing existing laws and things of that nature, and making sure that kids, in addition to parents, have due process rights, they're not being, maybe bullied or they're not being harassed, that's something that the Attorney General's office can do. The state of Florida did that recently. They opened up a division. And I'm telling people, and I mean what I say, I'm going to open up a division as well here. But that's something a little bit different than the financing structure and the incentive structure for education.
Got it.
But if I have
Okay.
a governor that I'd be working with that wants to really shake it up, I'm happy to help. See, the interesting thing I take a look at in the Constitution for the state of Michigan is that there's only one requirement, that the legislature fund schools.
They don't mandate how much they fund those schools.
And they also don't mandate that they provide a quality education. Nothing about quality. So it's like just throw money at something, but I'm not going to tell you how much, and I'm not going to hold you accountable for the actual, performance or the KPIs, the key performance indicators. Nothing like that. So it's interesting to me that some folks, maybe on both sides of the aisle, in Lansing, in the legislature, they talk about education. We have to hold people accountable. They're not holding themselves accountable because the actual state constitution doesn't even require that.
Well, it's a double-edged sword
Yeah.
because there's a candidate that yesterday got some press by saying that because July 1 is the year that the school starts, and July 1 technically is the date that the legislature should have completed a budget by.
Oh.
And they came out and they said, fine the legislators for not having a budget completed, and that will compel them to have a budget. And they were talking about schools because they say schools can't determine what their budget is without the state budget, which gives them the allocation of dollars.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very clever, nuanced way
Yeah.
of being a politician.
Yeah.
And as a business leader, all that does is sound good to the public.
Yeah.
It doesn't resolve the issue.
It doesn't fix the problem.
It literally, I believe that the governor can push through funding without a budget being done. We know that there's money there. We know that it's going to be allocated. You can call it temporary, you can call it a credit against. Schools need to be prepared, but we need to have specifically quality requirements
Mm-hmm.
for the people to invest in. And money goes with the kid because that's the real determining factor.
So, I mean, you take a look at the Michigan Department of Education, that falls under the purview of the governor. And as I was
Absolutely it
saying
does.
before, you as, whoever the governor may be in the future, whether you or someone else, and I know you haven't announced yet or anything like that, we need to ensure that we have a governor that will say to the Michigan Department of Education, these are the quality standards you need to have. And they can do that by through executive order. They can restructure how things look like. There's so much influence, and it kind of cuts any type of malaise or problem with the legislature.
See, I want to go on record in
Yeah.
saying that I believe that the governor should do that. I believe that the governor should take subject matter experts from Michigan and around the country to create what those criteria are, because I don't think that Michigan should ever accept an action by its chief executive that doesn't make Michigan number one or give them the potential to be the highest rated, highest valued state in America. No exceptions, no political influence,
Right.
no you owe somebody something.
Right.
And by the way, for all you haters out there, no compromise. It's tough to be first. It's tough to be top 1, 2, 3 in America. And I happen to believe that that's the only acceptable. Third place, if Michigan's the third greatest state in a country, that's still last place because there's a first place. And currently, Michigan in education ranks 47th, and we're trending down.
Oh, it's terrible. And, going back to my fraternity days, we had this saying with my fraternity brothers: we would rather die of thirst than drink from the cup of mediocrity. And we actually had that on our T-shirts for Rush and everything
love
else.
it.
Yeah. But the thing is, though, like even when I was superintendent, I mean, I did that for a few years and I loved it. But I'm very proud at what we were able to accomplish with a fraction of the budget and a fraction of the personnel of a comparably sized school district. During COVID, we actually had demonstrably, it's recorded, no learning loss. During that particular time, we actually increased for the first time in 50, 60 years the enrollment in our archdiocesan schools for the Archdiocese of Detroit. Why? Because we had the tools, tips, and techniques. We had those SMEs, those subject matter experts. We had people that had local control. And we did it for, I took a look, for example, maybe us versus Detroit Public Schools. In DPS, they're basically double the size of the Archdiocesan school system. But we did it on 1 over 180, 180th, I guess you can say, the level of administrators.
Yeah, the administration in public education, Michigan, out of
Loaded.
control.
Yeah.
Out of control.
Yeah.
We have just under or somewhere around 800 school districts.
Yeah.
I know the exact number,
Yeah.
but it's going over my head right now. In 83 counties.
Yeah.
10 school districts per county on average. Ludicrous, the administrative cost and waste and bureaucracy that goes into it. I say this all the time. I think in the 26 election, the number one issue is education
I agree.
and reestablishing priorities for our children that will allow them to experience the American and the Michigan dream.
Right.
Number two, taxation and the elimination of the personal income tax and a very thorough review in conjunction with the Attorney General, because we need to look at property taxes,
We do.
which are out of control, and literally the state in its government has started to work against the citizens. We had 180,000 foreclosures started against Michigan citizens last year.
Yeah.
180,000. Something's not working right. You shouldn't be renting your property after you have paid for your home on the land that you purportedly bought until the day you die. It's just wrong.
I think it's wrong. And without getting into a whole bunch of other legal cases, but of course, a long time ago, we had something called the Headley Amendment. And we see in various municipalities how they are putting on additional fees and other things to try to even tax people more without calling it taxes.
Absolutely.
And it's a problem and it needs to end.
It should be illegal
Yeah.
for local government. That's where I believe a strong attorney general
Yeah.
steps in and says, stop.
Amen.
Stop today. And by the way, rescind
Hmm.
your rules and regulations. No excuses whatsoever.
I have friends and colleagues of mine that actually have lawsuits and litigation in this area, just actually right up the street, about like a 5 or 10 minute drive from here. And they've been in front of the state Supreme Court, and it's an issue. And they need to say, to the court that this is illegal. I mean, that's one thing, but we need to actually just have the rule of law to actually have the executive, the attorney general, to tell these municipalities, you can't do that. It can't just be people, if they got a problem, they go to court all the time. We have to provide the leadership to make sure that the municipalities, know what the contours are, what the fences are, and don't go out of it. Because we should not have people paying rent effectively to live in their own homes.
Yeah, I love our legal system, but there is a nuance that several countries apply around the world. And it has diminished, in my view, frivolous lawsuits dramatically. That if you're willing to sue on an issue, that you have to have such solid legal standing because you have to put up a bond in case you lose
Hmm.
to pay for the loss. I'm not suggesting that for Michigan, but conceptually, in the environment that we are in,
Hmm.
with all these frivolous lawsuits and with people who are partisan in their application of the law,
Yeah.
we may have to get there at some point in time because people sue
Hmm.
to get something on the books so they can start to negotiate. And it's taking away the rights of the citizens and actually strengthening government and bureaucracy. And I think it's wrong.
And I agree with you. And we do have some tools available even at present. They're just sort of underutilized. So, for example, if someone has a lawsuit, that lawsuit gets dismissed or something happens with it where the court says, oh, this wasn't even legitimate in the first place, the prevailing party that was maybe defending against that frivolous lawsuit can actually file for attorney fees and sanctions. We have a statute for that.
I understand, but
Yeah.
judges are reluctant to apply fees. And when the fees are awarded
Hmm.
but not paid,
Hmm.
judges are reluctant to enforce against the attorney or the person that brought the case. And you got to admit that,
No,
Kevin.
that does happen, and I think that gives a nice opportunity for the governor, in addition to the legislature, to revisit that particular statute and to give it maybe a little bit more teeth. I mean, we have something called, appropriately, the American rule, where people are responsible for paying their own litigation expenses. But as you said, it's being used as a way to kind of bully people to negotiate. And that's the problem, because if folks actually engage in this and they negotiate and they come to a settlement, and they reach a resolution, then there isn't a mechanism to actually kind of enforce against attorney fees or anything like that. So that's why I think if we can have maybe a more beefed up, and if I'm attorney general, I'm happy to work with the governor in addition to the
I'm glad to hear
legislature.
that.
We can work on that.
You know, you wouldn't think that equal application of the law would be too expensive for citizens to access the law.
Yeah.
And like government, it's started to consume
Yeah.
itself. I believe our legal system has started because of the money involved.
Yeah.
And let's face it, we have attorneys out there that look at cases based on collectability. And the biggest cases that are being awarded are cases against government.
Hmm.
Well, that's fine for government abuse, and there should be accountability, but government doesn't exist without taxpayer money.
Right.
So you've got plaintiffs' attorneys that are suing the government and bragging about, oh, I won hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for the people.
But who's paying it?
I call BS.
Yeah.
They put the money in their pocket. They put the money in the pockets of a few at the expense of every citizen.
Yeah.
And so glad to hear. We've been talking a bit, and I'd like to give you the opportunity and folks, Kevin doesn't know that this question is coming. What would be the 5 top issues that you believe you would issue an opinion on
Sure.
if elected Attorney General?
So, in no particular order,
No particular order.
first, I want to take a look at our Second Amendment rights. A lot of people don't know this, but this whole idea of open carry, so you don't need to have a permit to carry a gun as long as it's visible, that's really creation of an Attorney General opinion. And I've said this on the trail. I want to have an Attorney General opinion to take a look at constitutional carry. I believe that individuals should have the ability to have a gun and simply not have to have it in a holster above, their coat, but it can be, simply appropriately stored in order to protect themselves. I think that's really important. So I'm a big believer in constitutional carry. An
As
attorney,
am I.
yep, and an attorney general opinion can go a long way to securing that. Of course, the legislature can do things, but frankly, the attorney general opinion would go a long way. Second, I would have an attorney general opinion about really the rights of parents and students. Because right now, I'm over here in Birmingham with you talking in my office, but not that far away from me is Rochester. Rochester is I would say, it's not a terrible school district, but they have a very questionable set of leaders over
They
there.
are stripping the rights of parents and the rights of students
Yeah.
of their constitutionally guaranteed rights.
I'll give you a really good example. This is like from 2 or 3 days ago. I had a woman contact me, and she said, I'm blocked right now from issuing comments on Facebook or on X on the official Rochester Community Schools social media accounts. And people might say, oh, what's the big deal? You can't do that. That's actually against the law. And you can actually get in a lot of trouble. So, not that I want to sue Rochester Community Schools, but I'm talking with her and a handful of others about it. But going back to your question, the second thing would be an attorney general opinion about the rights of students and parents
Hear, hear.
and issuing guidance to local public school districts what you need to do. The third attorney general opinion I would like to do is really this whole notion about what we just spoke about a few moments ago, but the Headley Amendment and property taxes. You cannot assess these additional fees and other things and disguise them as something else because they're really taxes. I want to make sure that we get that under control. The fourth Attorney General opinion I want to do is about the appropriate use of the legal system, essentially to stop this whole weaponization of government and lawfare. That needs to end. And I could talk on and about it, and I won't because I could bore folks about it. But, right now, our current Attorney General, in addition to other folks, are going after people because of a politicization of, their role. They shouldn't be doing that. Really, one good gentleman told me, and I think it's an apt description, defense should be hot and prosecution should be cold. And when it comes to the prosecution of a lot of people, they're getting their personal animus and their personal political beliefs involved. And I want to have an attorney general opinion about the appropriate role of prosecutors. Believe it or not, the Michigan Attorney General is part of the Association of Michigan Prosecutors, that group. And they can set the tone and the tenor about how to actually pursue various cases. I'm not against going after individuals to promote accountability, but you shouldn't be doing it where you're trying to bankrupt people, where they're spending $250,000 on legal fees for what? Because someone has a political gripe.
Yep.
And then probably the fifth Attorney General opinion I would deal with this whole notion about our elections. And again, it's not going to come on day one, but we would start the process on day one, taking a look at what the Secretary of State has done, unfortunately, to permit, at least right now, 15 non-citizens to vote in the last election in 2024.
We could get into
Yeah.
the weeds
Yeah.
on qualified voter files
Yeah.
and what this current administration has done. I'm not much of a butt kisser, but I got to tell you, if I run for governor and win, we're sitting down on day one and implementing those 5 things. If I don't run for governor, I am going to encourage the other candidates to sign those 5 things on day one. I'd like to see all those on day one.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going to get 26 hours out of the day instead of 24. But Kevin, that is so encouraging. And here's why it's so encouraging. It's common sense.
Yeah.
It represents everybody in Michigan equally. Mm-hmm. It protects everyone in Michigan, no matter what their socioeconomic, ethnic, or religious background is. It's what an attorney general is supposed to be doing versus the crap that's going on right now.
Yeah.
It is just ludicrous how bad the legal system has been abused by people that are trying to establish precedent with a strategy of destabilizing our legal system. And we have 3 branches of government for a reason. We are unique in our 3 branches of government. Mm-hmm. My cousin was a judge that went to Saudi Arabia to help them establish their legal branch of government.
Oh, wow.
And lived in Saudi Arabia for 7 years. From Michigan, by the way, in Kalamazoo County. And what's interesting about this is Saudi Arabia, to this day, has a legal system, but it is not an equal branch of governance. Very key element.
Yeah.
America has 3 sections of government, 3 legs that are supposed to be equal in nature. Mm-hmm. They support each other in nature, and they balance each other in nature.
Right.
We're the only country in the world.
What a blessing.
That has that. And it should be applied at the federal level. It should be applied at the state level. Mm-hmm. And with someone like yourself in that position, it sounds to me like you're on the right track.
I just want to make Michigan competitive. As I've said to a lot of different folks, this should be the #1 place to live. And, we shouldn't have kids, after they graduate from college, leaving and never coming back. And I've lived in other portions of the country. I lived in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, lived in Colorado, beautiful place, but nothing compares to Michigan. And I'm fortunate that in terms of my 3 siblings and yours truly, we all live here. There was a period of time where, we left for a year or 2 to maybe get experience or do something elsewhere. But I want to have a place where I can work with a legislature, work with the governor, work with others, make sure that we have a predictable, fair legal system so that companies will want to come here, employ people, and people get a fair shake.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm a dad of 3. 2 of my 3 live in Michigan. Mm-hmm. I'm working on my 3rd to come back, but he had to leave the state to find a job in his in his field, and we're working to get him back. My baby just got her first job in Michigan, I'm happy to say.
Great.
And when people say, why are you involved? Why do you care suddenly at this stage in your life? It's because I love Michigan.
Amen.
I want my family here.
Yeah.
And Michigan is what's great about America.
Right.
Kevin, I want to thank you for coming on. I'm going to reserve the right to have you come on again.
I'm happy to do that.
If you would.
Sure.
Folks, if you would, is there a way that people can access to find out more about you?
Sure. So they could go to my website, which is Kevin4MI, so KevinForMI.com. They can also take a look at me on social media. I don't have like Facebook and everything. I just have an X account, or formerly Twitter. And they would just put the @ symbol and search my name, Kevin, and then my last complicated Polish last name, Kijewski. But you could just Google that, and you'll be able to see all the different videos, interviews I've done. This particular interview that's happening, I hope to actually link it on that particular account as well.
We'll work with you so you can.
Sounds great.
Yeah, this is fabulous. And I want to go back to the viewers and say, this is what Beyond the Echo is about. Okay? This is the second time that I've sat down with Kevin. We had breakfast when I asked him to come on the show. And today we have a conversation. It's not scripted, folks. This is 2 people who care about Michigan, who care about you and educating you on issues that want you to have more from Michigan. Beyond the Echo. Watch it, share it. Please educate yourself. 2026 is going to dictate if Michigan becomes a top 3 state or if Michigan continues to spiral down into a very bad spot. God bless y'all. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Echo. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop us a comment and share the podcast with your friends. Stay connected and keep the conversation going by following us on social media. Until next time, keep exploring beyond the echo.